So I'm out here at the Tutukaka Reserve here in Northland. This is on the east coast, kind of 35 minutes out from Whanga City, and I've just got finished kind of recording my little comeback video thing here, and I thought that I would do kind of a little kind of plant session. So we're just going to walk around. I'm going to show you a bunch of the native plants that are in this area. Let's do it. Okay, where do we start? There's just plants galore everywhere. I might just start here with this one right up next to us. You may be able to guess what this is. This is a manuka, which is Leptospermum scoparium. Often people get a little bit confused between manuka and kanuka. There's a few ways that you can tell the difference though. So with manuka, I guess the most well-known way to tell the difference is with how it feels when you grab it. So people say manuka mean, kanuka kind. Manuka is a little bit mean because it's a little bit sharper on the tips of its leaves. I've got little, can't remember what the word is for it right off the bat. Pungent leaf tips means that they have kind of a pointy tip to them. And that is kind of a pretty easy way to tell the difference between manuka and kanuka. There is a few other ways though as well. Manuka flowers are quite a bit bigger. So if I just put my hand beside this manuka flower so you can kind of get a feel for how big the flowers are. Kanuka flowers are way smaller, perhaps even around a quarter the size. And that kind of follows through to their seed heads as well. So you can see we've got some seed heads here. The seed heads are a lot bigger on manuka and they remain kind of indefinitely attached to the branches. You can see that there's tons of seed heads here and they just kind of stay here. Even though they've opened up and released their seeds, they're still just kind of attached to the branches in their hundreds or even thousands. Whereas kanuka seeds, or kanuka kind of seed pods, they drop off relatively quickly, so you don't see tons of big seed pods just kind of remaining on the branches. And again, the kanuka seeds are, or the kanuka seed pods are a lot smaller as well. Next up, right beside this manuka, we have a pohudakawa, Metrosideros excelsa. So these are the leaves here. We don't have any flowers at this time of year. This one is quite easy to identify. It's pretty unique. If you look on the underside, you can see that the leaves are quite kind of white coloured. And that's because they're covered in kind of a very fine, dense mat of white hairs. And if you look very closely, you can see that the leaves are opposite each other. They come in pairs along the stem. So you can see there's two leaves kind of at each node along the stem. Okay, we've got a little seedling here. This is, if you know some native New Zealand plants, you may guess that this is karamu, Coprosma robusta, but this is actually a different species of Coprosma. I guess it's still technically a karamu. This one is called coastal karamu. It's Coprosma macrocarpa. And the one way, or the easiest way to tell the difference is from these stipules here at the base. I'm going to have to change my settings so I can get it to actually focus on the stipules. One moment. There we go, zoomed in. And that is the stipule. So you can see it's a very, very narrow looking kind of tooth looking thing. So a stipule it's kind of a leaf-like structure at the base of a leaf where it attaches to the stem. These are called interpetiolar stipules because they are kind of in between the two petioles of these opposite leaves here. Coprosma macrocarpa has super narrow, long stipules like that, and if you actually follow down the stem, they kind of dry out and drop off pretty quickly. So you can see that even the next stipule down is actually going a little bit brown, and it will very soon kind of drop off. Whereas for Coprosma robusta, the stipules stick around for quite a bit longer, and they're also quite a bit wider as well. They've got a broader base to them, whereas these are kind of narrow the whole way down the stipule. Okay, and over here we have some Coprosma macrocarpa berries for you to look at. These ones are not ripe yet. They will go kind of an orangey red colour when they ripen. But yeah, I believe macrocarpa, that means I think big seed or big fruit at least. I'd have to double check my my Latin on that one. But yeah, so they've got quite large fruit. So I think they're a bit bigger than Cuprosma robusta, but don't quote me on that. But otherwise these two species are quite similar, and you can easily mistake them for one another, especially up in Northland, because that is kind of where Cuprosma macrocarpa occurs, whereas further south I believe it is just Cuprosma robusta that you're going to see around the place. Okay, next up we've got one on the ground here amongst the kikuyu. This is bracken, or Pteridium esculentum I believe it is. Quite a unique species of fern here. You can see that the pinnae are kind of almost linear to rectangular in shape. You can see that there. Quite a distinct looking fern. So that is Pteridium esculentum. And of course, being on the coast, we are going to have coastal five-finger, Pseudopanax lesonii. So this is the leaf here. So this is a compound leaf made up of typically 5 leaflets, but sometimes you'll get less than 5, perhaps just 3 leaflets like you can see on this top one here. Pretty unique plant. You're not going to get this mistaken for many other species, although sometimes it will hybridize with Pseudopanax crassifolius, which is our lancewood species. And if that happens, then you do get kind of a bit of a mishmash of leaf morphology, kind of a mixture between the two. But otherwise, pretty easy to identify. And we do have a few berries here. See if I can zoom in on those. There we go. So those are the berries of Pseudopanax lesonii. We've even got a New Zealand flax here, Harakeke Phormium tenax. I don't know if this got here by itself or if it's been kind of planted here or whatnot, but yeah, Phormium tenax. Everyone knows this one. New Zealand flax. This one's going to be a bit of a nightmare to focus on, but this is knobby clubrush. So it's Phacinia nodosa, and the easiest way to identify this is it's just kind of near the tips of these leaves is a kind of a little nodule of seeds. So that's Phacinia nodosa, or knobby clubrush. Okay, and here we have our native clematis. This is Clematis paniculata. I can't remember the Māori name off the top of my head. We'll start with the leaves. So these leaves are trifoliate, meaning that they are compound leaves that kind of divert into 3 individual leaflets. So that's what we call a trifoliate leaf. And the flowers here, these ones are quite small. I have heard someone say that male and female flowers are separate and that they are different sizes. I don't actually know, I haven't done the research myself, but that may be why these ones look quite a bit smaller than what I'm used to seeing. Okay, so I've just done a quick Google to fact check myself, and the Māori name for this plant is Puawhananga, and they do indeed have different sized flowers depending on whether it's a male or female flower. So these are female flowers, where they are a bit smaller than the male flowers, which is what I've obviously been seeing around the place more frequently. And yeah, so there you have it. So the female flowers are smaller than the male flowers. I'll see if I can find you a bigger male flower to compare. And actually, before we do that, I'll just show you, this looks like we've got some seeds that are developing. So the petals have fallen off, and we've got kind of these hairy seeds forming as well. Okay, so I've got a male flower here. It's kind of a little bit stuck in the undergrowth a little bit. Can't really get a good angle on it, but you can see that compared to my hand here, it's a lot bigger than the female flowers I was showing you just before. Okay, this here is quite a cool find. So this is a native sun orchid. So this is in the genus Thalymetra. I don't have the confidence to attempt identifying it without having the flowers actually in bloom. So I'm unfortunately here at the wrong time to actually catch the flowers in action. But that's pretty cool. So that's a Thylometra genus, a native sun orchid. You can see we've got the leaf down the bottom here, kind of a grass-like looking leaf, and then the flowering stem. Got a bunch of flowers at the top, but they're not in bloom currently, so we've just missed out. Alright, and just behind that we have another Coprosma species. So you may remember the coastal karamu I was looking at earlier with those great big leaves and fruit. This happens to be in the exact same genus. So this is Coprosma rhamnoides, or I think it's called twiggy Coprosma or small-leaved Coprosma. And yeah, it just shows the extreme diversity of this genus of plants. So they're clearly a very successful group of plants, being able to kind of diversify into such a broad number of niches. And this is quite cool, just to show the kind of variation within a single species. So this is the same trifoliate leaf of our clematis, the puawhananga, but you can see that when it's a bit younger, I think that's when it is, but when the leaves are younger, or when the plant is younger, you can see that the leaves have a little bit of, or they have some lobes, or almost just about toothed along their margins as well. So that's quite interesting. So keep that in mind. If you're ever looking at the species, sometimes the leaves are going to be toothed, other times they're just a entire leaf margin. And just above here we've got some more Coprosma macrocarpa fruit. We've got a whole heap more on this one. This is karo, or Pirosporum crassifolium. Sometimes it can be mistaken for Pohutukawa, because these species both have this kind of white tomentous underside to them. It is quite easy to distinguish them though, because these leaves are obovate in shape, meaning that they're an upside down egg, or if we're looking at it this way around, it's the right way up, but coming from the base of the stem, they're kind of an upside down egg shape. And also, if you look at the leaf attachment, you can see that the leaves are alternating. So you can see that the leaves are kind of one per node, whereas if you remember with the Pohutukawa that we were looking at earlier, the leaves are opposite, so they come in pairs. We have here Hangi, Geniostoma ligus trifolium. Leaves on this are opposite as well. If we look here closely, leaves come in pairs on the stem, 2 per node. And I believe we've got some fruit or flowers forming in there, kind of hidden, tucked away. Here we go, here's some more easy to see flowers over here. Can we get that to focus? Almost, come on. Here we go. So that's the Hangi flower. And right next to it, we've actually got another Coprosma species. I know there's just Coprosma galore over here. We've got, I think, around 60 species of Coprosma in New Zealand. This one here, another one with really small leaves, as you can see. This one is Coprosma areolata, which is the thin-leaved Coprosma. It can sometimes be mistaken for a juvenile Coprosma arborea, which is the tree Coprosma. They've got that same spatulate-shaped leaf. You see where the leaf itself kind of continues down the petiole a bit, so that's a spatulate shape. Coprosma arborea also has that shaped leaf, and when it's a younger tree, you may accidentally think that it's Coprosma areolata. So just keep that in mind. This one has much kind of thinner leaves, hence the thin-leaved Coprosma name, and very distinct venation as well. Here's an even better example of that variation in leaf shape for this clematis species. So you can see that's very kind of deeply lobed here, and on the same plant, well, I assume it's the same plant, it's a bit dense here so I can't tell for sure, you can see that this leaf is perfectly smooth, or what we call entire. The margin is entire, while this one here is extremely lobed. Here's another fern for you. This is Asplenium oblongifolium. So this is the shining spleenwort, and yeah, quite a distinct species. Got super kind of stiff pinnae. They're quite sturdy, and they're not super bendy or floppy or anything like that. And here's the flowers of karo. So when the flowers are present, you can tell that this is quite a distinct species from Pohutukawa, of which I mentioned that they can sometimes be mistaken for. These flowers are quite unique. Okay, well here's a bad one. This one's not native. Climbing asparagus. And of course we're going to come across some of this. It is pretty rampant in most places. It's a bit of an unfortunate plant to be here, but well, enough moping about the invasive weeds. Over here we have Adiantium hispidulum, which is the rough maidenhair fern. It doesn't look like it's doing too well out here in this kind of dry field that we're currently hanging out in. I haven't even made it into the bush yet, but there you go, there's another fern for you. And if you haven't had enough of the variation of this clematis leaf, take a look at this. We've got some variegated clematis leaves. That's pretty wild. Well, I almost walked straight past this tree, kind of walking through here, and this is a puriri tree. I don't know if it's self-sown or if someone has come out here and planted it, because this landscape is pretty barren, so I'm guessing that people have come out and done some plantings here and there. But let's take a closer look. So puriri, Vitex lucens, it's in the Lamiaceae family, which is closely related to mint of all things, which is a bit weird, but we don't judge. This giant tree is closely related to that little kind of straggly plant that you grow in your garden. Look at that, so we've got some great big fruit here. These aren't ripe yet, but they go kind of quite a vivid pink when they're ripened. And we do have a few flowers on this tree currently, but it seems like a lot of the flowers are, well, turned into fruit already, haven't they? I can't seem to get a good focus on them though. And there we go, so that's a puriri flower. To my right here we have Dudia australis, which is the rasp fern. One moment, my exposure is horrific there. There we go, so Dudia australis, rasp fern. Cute little native fern here, and if we take a look at the bottom here, super obvious kind of 2 rows of these clusters of sporangia, if that'll focus. So each pinnae has 2 rows of these sporangia clusters. So a cluster of sporangia is called a sorus, or in plural that is a sori, or multiple sori. And yeah, so you can see that kind of 2 rows of sori along each pinnae. So here's another non-native plant. We've got Erigerone kavinskianus, which is the Mexican fleabane. You can see that we've got some white flowers and also some pink ones over there. And the leaves themselves are kind of situated along these kind of purple stems. Oh, where's the... well, only purple on top. On the underside of the stem they are green, which is interesting to note. So green underside of the stem, purple along the top of the stem. You can see that the leaves themselves are, they've got some lobes on them. If we get some focus here, there we go. Lobed leaves, classic daisy shaped flower, and there you have it. Erigerone kavinskianus. Okay, well we're finally kind of escaping this open, dry, scrubby area, and we're entering into a little bit of bush, so that's exciting. Let's see what we can find in there. To be honest, it's probably going to be a bunch more of the exact same stuff, but I'm sure I'll find 1 or 2 new things. Like just to the right or left right here, I've come across another plant. We've got Kawakawa, Piper excelsum. Pretty cool. Okay, here we go. We've got another plant here. This is red matipo, or Myrcene australis. So you can see why it's got the name red matipo. The stems are very vividly coloured red. Okay, I found this tiny little seedling on the ground here. Wasn't expecting to see this here, but we've got a totora seedling, Podocarpus totora. Okay, so we've got a super localized species here, not the rasp fern, but if we just look over here, we've got this species endemic to the Northland region. So this is Veronica ligus-trifolia. It doesn't have a common name as far as I know, but it is, I guess, kind of similar to many other Veronica species. What makes this one more unique is that it has super bendy malleable leaves, and the calyx, which is kind of the green cup that holds each individual one of these flowers. So you can see this is an inflorescence of many individual flowers. You can see, I probably won't be able to show you on here because it's very small, but the calyx, which is the green cup kind of at the base of each flower, is longer and extends kind of beyond the corolla, which is kind of the flower tube. And yeah, kind of some tricky terminology there. I will be making videos to kind of explain this in more detail. All of this information is freely available online, really. If you just search up the species and go to the New Zealand Plant Conservation Network, they have extremely detailed descriptions of every plant species in New Zealand pretty much. But yeah, this is a pretty cool find. It's always fun finding a kind of an endemic species to a particular area. Veronica ligostrifolia. Hey, we've got here a Mahoe seedling, Meliscitis ramiflorus. First one I've actually seen, which I'm a bit surprised by. Usually these are quite a bit more common, but cool. And this looks like the remains of a cabbage tree, Cordyline australis. No longer alive. Although there's a living one right there. Cordyline australis. There we go. New Zealand cabbage tree. I think it's time to pay some love to those tiny little plants that we just kind of step over every day when we're walking through the bush. And yes, I'm talking about that right at my feet there. Centella uniflora. So there you go. Not sure if it has a common name, but that's what we're looking at here. It's kind of lily pad shaped leaves. So I've just busted out from that little bit of bush there, and I'm now on this very precarious kind of steep drop off down to the ocean. This is just beautiful. I don't know if I'm going to find anything new. I think I've kind of come across all of the plants that have kind of stood out to me. I'm sure there's hundreds of species that I've just not taken notice of. There's one more thing I just want to mention, which is quite cool here, is that this cliff face that I'm standing on, well, it's almost a cliff face. I'm on a very steep slant here. It looks like it's constantly buffeted by the wind coming in here, and what that has caused is pretty much all of these plants that do sometimes grow into trees look like they are these tiny little prostrate plants now. So we've got Manuka here, which is in heavy flower, so that shows that it's a mature plant, but it is literally only, I don't know, at most a foot off the ground. And same over there, we've got a cabbage tree. I mean, this one's not flowering, but I mean, it's not a tree, it's just it again is only like a foot off the ground. And we've got these tiny little flaxes growing, and we've got the odd shrub here and there. The cardo seems to be doing okay. It also depends when these plants actually kind of started growing here. I don't know if they're recently planted or self-sown or whatever, but yeah, we've got some tiny little pohutukawas here as well. Quite a few pohutukawa actually. But again, they're just these tiny little, I wouldn't even call them a shrub at this point. They're so, it appears that they've been beaten by the wind so much that they've just kind of submitted and decided to grow as low to the ground as possible. So that's pretty clever of them. Alright, well this is a species that I was not expecting to see. So this is Drosera auriculata. You can see that there's these funny flower shaped looking things, and I've got these little sticky droplets on the tips of these little kind of tentacle things. I don't really know what you're supposed to call it, but this is a carnivorous plant, and that is a very cool find. I was not expecting this, and I'm super excited to have found it, and they're actually everywhere around here. I've found a whole bunch of them, carnivorous plants all over the place, and the reason that these species go carnivorous is typically because they grow in areas where there's just really poor nutrients, which is expected on a steep cliff where I am currently hanging out. And to the bottom left, you can actually see there's a flower. There's one single flower that I've found, and this is what confirms that it is Drosera auriculata and not Drosera hookerii. The main difference here is that Drosera hookerii has hairy sepals, and you're probably wondering, what the heck is a sepal? Well, the sepal is the green kind of leaf-shaped structure that goes directly beneath the petals. So you've got the pink petals at the front there, and behind it, I don't know if I'm going to be able to capture this. Come on, focus. Beneath it is these green sepals. They're kind of like leaf-looking structures. If they're hairy, then it is Drosera hookerii, whereas if it is glabrous, meaning that there are no hairs, then it is Drosera auriculata. So that is super cool. I'm very stoked to come across these today. Well, that is all. I've had enough of hanging out on that precarious cliff face there. Super excited about finding that carnivorous plant, and all in all had a good time. So I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me for this adventure looking for plants, and I'm glad we found a few rare ones.